Well, a very good day, everyone, and thanks to all of you who've joined us either on Zoom or live on YouTube. Welcome to the side sessions of the third UN South Asia Forum on Business and Human Rights. Today's session, this session right now, will focus on power imbalance in the global supply chain, the need for dialogue, and it is hosted by Fair Weather. This is one of several side sessions leading up to the plenary forum that will happen March 28th to 30th in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and online. Just a quick note that this session is being recorded, and of course it is live on YouTube. We're so glad to have you here as part of this session, and I have two things for us to keep in mind during this session. Number one, if you are speaking, perhaps if you're asking a question or you're contributing a comment, we would love to be able to see you. So do go ahead and bring your webcam on if you are speaking. And two is you can post, if you've joined us on Zoom, you can post comments or questions into the chat. So please go ahead and either use the chat icon at the bottom. You can also raise your hand. So that's under the reactions button. You click reactions and then raise hand. Now, moderating today's session will be Suhasini Singh, who is the regional coordinator for South Asia at Fairware. So Suhasini, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carl. Good morning to all, and thank you for giving your morning hours to listen to this session. My name is Suhasini, and I work with the Fairware as a country manager of India and regional coordinator for Bangladesh and Indonesia. I'll be the moderator of the session as introduced, but before I go ahead, I wanted to ask some question to the participants. I know it's quite early, like just start of the day, but to have a sense of where people are joining from. Can the organizers please put up the question? Which countries are you joining from? This is a question to the audience. Which countries are you joining from?
And you could go ahead and post your response to the chat.
Indonesia.
You can post it in the chat. Okay. We don't have responses yet, and also maybe people are still trickling in.
Oh, so Hasini, we do have a few responses in the chat.
We do? I don't see it. Right, I'm seeing the question. Right, of course.
So I'm reading in the chat, Girija, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Bablu Rahman, Bangladesh.
Yeah, okay. That's nice. And the second question is, how many of you, or are you, the participants, are you familiar with the garment industry? Okay.
And so we just
right.
pop that as a poll on Zoom. So Hasini, shall I end the poll and post the results?
Yeah, please end the poll because I wanted to get a sense. So we have a couple of responses, and all of them says they are familiar with the industry. Thank you for your answers, and we can take the poll out, Carl. I would like to introduce panelists for this session. I'll start with Ms. Holly Grata. She's the member of the trade union called TSK SPSI, Textile, Shoes and Leather, All Indonesia Workers Union from 2003 until now. Along with her union work, she teaches psychology in several universities in Indonesia. She's joining us from Indonesia. Welcome, Mohli. Mr. Arun Kumar has been working with ILO since August 2014. Prior to that, he worked with the ILO's International Training Center in Turin, Italy, in the area of workers' education and training activities for Asia Pacific. He has extensive experience of working with employers, workers, and labor ministries on issues connected with decent work, management policies, freedom of association, collective bargaining, labor standards, and labor law reforms. He's joining us from Thailand. Welcome, Mr. Arun. Major Lutful Martin, he served almost 23 years in Bangladesh Army in different capacity. As a military staff officer, he served in Ivory Coast with UN Blue Helmet. On completion of his military service, he joined National Denim Limited as director. After joining National Denims, he participated in a number of seminar and training sessions on business and human rights within the country and abroad. He's joining us from Dhaka. Welcome, Mr. Lutful. Mr. Pranjal Jyoti Goswami is with ETI, a multi-stakeholder initiative from the UK. Pranjal specializes in strategy development, project management, stakeholder engagement, business and human rights, advocacy, and capacity building. He has led many domestic and international initiatives related to sustainability strategy, CSR, OSH, ESG, climate change, and business development. Pranjal has been engaging with various organizations as a strategic advisor and project consultant in the area of sustainable development. He's joining us from India. Welcome, Mr. Pranjal. The garment industry plays a vital role in the developing nations by its sheer nature of being labor-intensive industry. It provides employment to thousands of workers, and for countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India, it is a significant part of the national economy. While most of the global brands are based in the West, the production happens mainly in the southern countries, primarily because the cost of production is less. However, there are several dynamics that come into play in the industry. We will hear from our panelists specifically on the power imbalance in the supply chain. I'm turning to Pranjal. Pranjal, as someone working in MSI, you have a complete overview of the industry. You know about all the players in the industry, in the supply chain. According to you, what are the power centers in supply chains specific to the garment industry?
Hi, yes, Suhasini. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for inviting me for this session. I think, yeah, if you see there are so many different players or actors within the supply chain. And if we go back to the topic of this particular session, we really acknowledge that there is a power imbalance, right? I mean, that's why we are here today and kind of discussing or deliberating about the value chain in the garment sector. But I think question is not about whether the imbalance is there or not. Imbalance is there in all sector and always been there. But right now the question is whether the imbalance is growing in a way. So if you see from a multi-stakeholder angle into the garment sector, I think the power concentration is happening around the brands or the buyers in a way. But we need to see about there are two differential power which been acting in the garment sector. One is a vertical power, which is basically directing between the commercial angle. Then there are horizontal power in basically you can see in most of the production countries. Now, when you talk about the actors, I think the brands or the buyers in the terminology of the garment sector in a way, it's a market dynamic sometimes which are kind of creating what you call the differential in the power. I think garment industry is one of the characterizing the garment industry is that the business they are in having a very short production life cycle. There's a high volatility. There's very low predictability, and there's a monopolistic competition. What I mean by the monopolistic competition is a very less entry level barrier for any new entrant to come into the market in a way. And I think the primarily, if you see the business is driven by the consumer demand, and which we have been observing for years now, that the consumer demands are changing so fast, and that creating a pressure on the brands to be survive in the competition, and how fast they can go into the market with a new or innovation or innovative product or new product in the sense. So that is creating a power imbalance, because then that has been shifted to the production houses or the production countries in a way. And because of the demand from the consumer, it is going into creating a two kind of pressure. One is the price squeeze and the sourcing squeeze in a way. Price squeeze is because they need to produce quickly, they need to come, and always there have been a pressure from the investors for better margin or lower cost in a way. So that from that angle of being sustained in the business, being profitable in the garment sector, the brands are basically squeezing the prices in the market in a way. And then the sourcing squeeze, because of your high volatility, the low lead time. I mean, I think there is empirical evidence, or very a lot of studies have shown that the number of days now in production cycle has come down. The payment system has, the window between the payment order and the payment has gone up. So, and the real value, what exactly you pay for a garment, has come down significantly in last 20 years of empirical data shows that. So in that way, we are seeing that what is happening is that when you are squeezing the suppliers for the price or the sourcing, ultimately the adverse impact is passing on to the workers. That means all those associated, whether it is related to wages, whether it is related to working time, whether it is related to other health and safety, mental health, psychological health, whatever you name it within this thing, those are the things which been diluted, or those regulations has been and the compliance effect has been reduced in a way. I think we need to also understand a little bit about the other players within the value chain, how the state or the government is doing in that way. What are the things? Basically, if you see, there's again a power imbalance between global south and global north, right? When I'm talking about the equation between the policies or the government policies between the global north and global south, which basically creating a cycle where you see more competition between global south and global south, right, in the garment sector, because most of the production of the garment happening barring few countries in Europe, probably Turkey, or the MENA region in something. But usually it is the global south which happening the production. I mean, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, you name it. I mean, all of these countries are so much into the garment sector. Probably we are, all these countries producing more than 80% of the garment, including China in that way. So one of the things that global south and global north differential power, creating one imbalance in terms of the legislation or the rules and regulation, basically covering the garment sector. Looking into the flow of capital from global north to the south, many times you'll see a lot of flexibility in the labor laws, though there a lot of countries have excellent labor laws, but it's the enforcement where it is the power dynamics plays in a way that because you don't want to upset any kind of investment flowing into the garment sector from any of those powerful financial players. So you see that there's a improper or not adequate kind of implementation or enforcement of the laws, that creating again that is actually reducing the civil space in a way, or the reducing the influence of the trade union, that space they used to have in a way, and that is giving an incentive to the suppliers to avoid the trade unionism in a way that they are terming it as a kind of bottleneck or creating the roadblock for high efficiency improvement in terms of delivering to the demand of the suppliers or delivering playing to the market dynamics in a way. But I think right now we probably have discussed about the imbalance in the power or asymmetric distribution of power in a way. But I think we should now discuss more about whether we have achieved what we wanted to achieve in the garment sector, related to whether the concentration of power happening in one player and making it more powerful, whether the ways we have been engaging with different players to bring them either the bottom-up approach or top-down approach, whether those approaches are creating positive impact in terms of creating more equilibrium in the power centers, or we need to see that whatever methodologies we have, how we can make those engagement more and more viable or more and more practical, pragmatic, so that each player or each part of the value chain can be can create a positive impact for the future in a way. I think I'll stop here, but I want to just point out one more thing is that when you talk about horizontal power within the production country, we need to also look into how you incorporate something like power imbalance related to the gender, because one of the things we observed that the garment sector predominantly employed women, or and most of the time we have found that the people or the workers representatives in these sectors are basically male, and I can see there's an imbalance of power between that gender representation in a way. So we probably need to look into that as a part of the power equation in the garment sector. I'll stop here, Suhas.
Thank you, Pranjal. That was a good oversight, and also seeing where power concentrates in the supply chain. And from what I hear, you say power, by its very nature, it concentrates at the brand level. And of course, it's also driven by consumers largely because from their demand to come up with new products. So consumer also has exercises certain power. And then the third one largely is the government laws and policies, again, north versus south, and how that comes into play. We will go to Ms. Holly Igrata. As a union, you come at the tail end of the supply chain.
Yeah.
But as a worker and then as a unionist, how much do you agree to what has been said by Pranjal? And also what you think about the way powers are concentrated at different levels?
I think I agree to what Prajal Goswami said. It is right, very much right, that the power goes to the buyers and then customers, the trend that create in customers. But then there's any other factors, of course, how the company, the factories treat their labor, their employee, also make a big difference here. Okay, because when your employee is secure, their welfare is secure, I think we can say that the trained worker, the trained employee make a better products than uneducated make a better products that can be sold in a better price. So we can attract better market and better buyers when our employee is prosper. I don't know how to say this, but there's some kind of mindset from the company that trade union somehow is a trade, but we're not really. We are not. This trade union exists because there's problem in company to begin with. So when your company is trouble, you cannot produce good. You cannot produce a good product to sell. Okay, you cannot attract good buyers. You cannot attract good brands. Okay, so you need to make sure that your employee well paid. You need to make sure not only well paid, but you need to make sure their wealth. Okay, in this terms of wealth, I mean they're secure in their heart. They feel able to go to work without worries. They have all they need to work and produce good product. Okay, I don't know how to say it in English because my English isn't that good, but I know that someone that healthy inside in his mind, someone that feels secure to go to work and know that his work, her work will be able to pay for her meal, for her daily activity, will work better than anyone else. You need to create a good communication between the company's managers and your workers. The good communication that you're able to understand what they really need, not only to sell products. You need to treat your employee, your workers, like a human, not only as something that create your products. Okay, that make a huge difference, of course, between someone that treated like a human and someone who treated like a machine, like a target. Today you need to make 100 goods. Tomorrow you need to make 100 goods. You treat them like a machine, and then you will see that their job's not good enough. Yeah, but you need to treat them like a human. Treat them like a human. You know what they need. You know how desperate they are for paying for their bills. And then you can see how they treat you equally, how they will make the best of goods that you will to sell. So the better the product, the better chance you get a better buyer, the better chance you get a better customer, the better chance you can create demand. That's why I said maybe I will stop here as a labor perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving on, I'll ask Mr. Martin to reflect on what has been said, of course, but since you are running a factory in Bangladesh, producing clothes for the brands and hiring workers to produce these clothes, and you are in a way also sandwiched between the two very critical parties in the supply chain, brands and workers. What is your take on the hierarchies in the supply chain?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, madam, for inviting me in the session. I will start with one question to everybody, that we are talking about the welfare of the workers. We are talking about the right of the workers. But they are belongs to whom? Are they only belongs to the entrepreneur, or they are belongs to the brands also? We have to find it out first, because for any welfare, for any rights, you need some sort of flow of money. Now this money is highly concentrated with the brands, a partial with the entrepreneurs, and the believers are in the receiving ends. If you go through the history of this subcontinent, you will find that since long, for last 150 years or so, we are uh, in favor of the trade union or the CBA. But in this subcontinent, you will find that the CBA history is not that encouraging, whether it is in Bangladesh, whether it is in Sri Lanka, whether it is in India. Everywhere you will find that it creates some sort of problem once CBA is there. So in the private sector, like in garments, it creates a panic to the entrepreneurs, that the fear of unknown always working in their mind, that if he is having a CBA, that it might create some problem in his factory or in his supply chain. Now, the second thing is, even if he can overcome that fear, and if he is allowing, like me, where I am having a CBA for last 7 years in my factory, I try to own my workers. Now, if I want to own my workers, I have asked very outside that these workers belongs to whom, whether are they belongs to me or they belongs to the brands also. Because once we are going to a shop, buying a product, we see the brand. We didn't know that from which factory or from which country these products are coming. We as a customer or as a end user, we always value with the brands. Now, these brands are taking those items through us from a factory. We are some sort of intermediate position or some sort of broker which invested a good amount of money in the industry. We are taking these orders from the brands, and we think things are done through the workers, and we are sending it to the uh, brands again. 2 years back, if you can remember, Fairware, they have carried out a survey on this market situation, and they have found that if a product uh, was brought from a brand at a price of $10 per piece, adding $1 as a transportation cost, so it comes $11. But once that brand is selling it to his franchisees, he is adding 100% of that value. So he's selling it to the franchisees with a cost of $22. And once those franchisees are selling it to the end consumers, they are adding more 133% of that value. So the the price was $10, but once it is going to the end of the customer, it costs almost $50. Now, out of that $50, only $10 are belongs to the entrepreneur or the garments factory owners. And within this $10, they have to manage the fabric, they have to manage the accessories, they have to manage the wages of the workers. I can tell you, in Bangladesh, each and every year in the month of January, we have to increase the salary of the worker. This year, my only in the wages sector, my salary is increased is by 25,000 US dollar per month. So if it is going like this, and if the brands are not supporting the owner or the entrepreneur, then after 3 or 4 years, we have to go for shutdown. Because at that time, it will be in a position that we cannot sustain in the additional cost of these wages and other factors. So everybody, we know that everybody is looking for his own interest and own share, but we have to be very transparent, and we have to support each other. In a factory, once this trade union is coming with their different demands, as we are having a provision of social dialogue, we try to make them understand what is my present scenario and what is their demand. So we have a scope to have a communication with each other. But the workers, they don't have any scope to have a meeting or to have a view exchanging or system with the brands. Now, brands are always pursuing the factories or the owners to have a CVA. We are also in favor of CVA. But what benefit a factory receiving from the brands if he is having a CVA? Is there any brand who is giving additional price to the factories which is having a CVA? Is there any brand who is giving additional quantity of orders to a factory which is having a CVA, the factory which is upholding the workers' right? You will not find a single one. I'm telling you, you will not find a single one who is supporting. So if you want to support the workers' right, if you support the CVA, then you have to also come out from your box. You have to curtail a percentage of your profit for the welfare of these workers. Because from where I will get this additional money? As per the law of the land in Bangladesh, every year you have to increase their salary 5%. But as I am having a CVA with my trade union, I have to increase it more 2%. In case in my factory, I am increasing 7%. So I am increasing 2% more than that of any other competitor in Bangladesh or the factories in Bangladesh. Now, once I am putting the cost to a brand, he is considering me with the other factories who is not having a CVA, who is increasing 5% salary of his workers, but I am increasing 7% salary of my workers, but I am not getting any benefit. So this mindset is very much required, that how we are going to make it in a common platform, or how we are going to support this CVA, and how these things can be happen. So till that time, everybody becomes a active part of these things. Before that, this power imbalance cannot be done. For balancing the things, all the three parties, including the controlling authority, that means the government, should come in the same platform. They should sit together and they should come to an end that yes, this is how we are going to balance the power. This is the portion of my profit I am going to share with this. The owner will have this much of share, and thereby the workers' right can be ensured. So I need to stop here because others are there, and I'll come afterwards if it's required. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. And I think you have made the work of the next panelist a bit easier by already introducing the word dialogue. Arun, I'm coming to you. You're working closely with the government and lays most of the broader normative principles yourself as an organization. The three crucial players of the industry that we heard, brands, you heard supplier, Mr. Martin just spoke, and also from workers' side. The three these crucial players of the industry, but each of them have different, or there's a difference in the strengths that they have, that they enjoy in the supply chain. What do you think, why do you think it is so? And how can it be corrected to bring a sense of equilibrium in the chain? Because each one is dependent on the other for the business. Over to you, Arun.
Thank you, Suhasini, for inviting me to this discussion. And thank you all for sharing your views. Look, one major part of the problems that we see in the supply chains in general and garment supply chains in particular is a lot of problems are arising due to the nature of the industry itself. Where is in a market, and we're talking about market economy here, basically, whether we like it or not, the way the world is moving right now, the way most economies are, there's large amount of, so-called what we call free flow of market forces. Garment factories are part of global supply chain, and buyers set the quantity as well as the price, basically. And now this limits what the workers can get from the factory owners and suppliers also, normally speaking. Just immediately to answer the previous. Even if you improve productivity in a garment factory, the purchasing firm up in the chain can and often does force down the unit prices each year, basically. If you see the rules of our tendering and rules that we operate, not only in the garment, but in any hotel, restaurant, if somebody has to get a contract for, it doesn't favor, the rules don't favor the ones who has had his workforce for a long time with him or her, basically, because the prices, the lowest possible bidder will get the contract. Do you think the lowest possible bidder can be someone who's kept his workforce on a regular employment for last 10 years? Or the lowest possible bidder in a labor intensive company would be someone who hires people at contract, casual, those kind of things. So the rules itself, the way the market operates, basically creates problems. In any case, I feel that power imbalance in supply chains is inevitable, basically. That's because of due to the differences in the roles and the dependence of the actors on each other, which then kind of reflects itself in prices, contracts, wages. However, if you look at, we all know the brands have the power, but that's generally true. But the suppliers are not necessarily without power, the factory owners, because there are some other factors such as ability to deliver on scale, quality, timeliness of delivery, all these factors matter. So that's why, I don't think the brands always go to the cheapest possible. They also have these other considerations. And that's why, companies like Foxconn, for example, keep getting the orders, and some of the bigger factory owners also keep, because the brands know that here we can depend, they can deliver, basically. So brands don't necessarily always go to ones that have the worst possible conditions and the cheap, basically. Now, between factory owners and workers, basically, there exists a scope to balance factory owners' power versus, that's why we have a role for government policy, we have a role for labor law compliance, and we have a role for social dialogue and collective bargaining culture also. Plus, of course, in all these also matters is capacities to do so, basically. Because if we leave things just to completely to the market forces, then I would like to just ask a simple question to everyone. Have you ever wondered, basically, where is, in a market economy, basically, in a labor intent, the basic, where is the power, basically? What are the kind of workers or the unions which seem to get relatively better wages? Or if the unions threaten to go on strike, the system responds a little faster. Have you ever wondered if the power sector workers or if the airline pilots threaten to go on strike, the whole system responds a little faster to their problems as compared to when the garment workers threaten to go on strike? And if the rickshaw pullers threaten to go on strike, the system responds even much less, normally speaking, because the power of a worker or basically, and the wages of the worker depend on how capital intensive the sector is, basically. Why is a Bangladeshi worker has a less negotiating power than a German worker, for example? Because the German workers, if they threaten to withdraw their labor or threaten to go on strike, the loss to capital is high. So that's one of the sources of power. So if in a supply chain, you are at the fag end of this thing, the power lies more at the brand end or to the retailer's end, basically. Which brings me to the other point, basically. Further away from the final market you are going to be working, the lesser the power you're going to have. The closer to the market you are employed or working, relatively more the power you will have. That's how things generally work in the market economy. I mean, basically, because that's where you are able to influence the market. So, I mean, one should not be surprised that we have problems in garment sector. It's labor intensive, basically, and people who are in labor intensive sector, wages are low, but wage costs are high. Always remember that. because it's more labor intensive. In a capital intensive sector, wages are relatively better, higher too, but wage costs are low. That's the logic how it works. And that's, anyway, we'll talk about all these little later. Now, effect of power in supply chains also depends on what is the objective for which the power is used. If the brands want to use their power to improve working conditions, efficiencies, compliance, they can do so. But they can also create conditions for exploitation of suppliers and workers in supply chains using the same power. So in the long run, many brands have realized, I guess, imagine so, that the coercive use of power adversely affects relationships and working conditions and can create instabilities in the supply chain. I mean, strikes and a whole lot of other things, basically, And that's why we feel, as ILO always tries to educate, basically, social dialogue can improve outcomes for all, basically, So why I say supply chains need labor relations culture based on social dialogue and cooperation. And now I also want to clearly highlight here that social dialogue is not just a tool for addressing workers' concerns, but both employers and the government also need to realize that social dialogue also influences productive processes. Where is social dialogue, collective bargaining, labor relations? That's where factories are. That's where investments are. That's where economic activities are. So if you are going to be creating labor relations which are conflictual, you're not just being tough on some worker or that. You are actually also adversely affecting the rate of return on investments by not creating that environment that is necessary to get the best possible rate of return. Now, any employer, I would ask, factory owner in Bangladesh or in India, if by dealing with workers in your factory in a more positive, cooperative, creating conditions, basically, it helps you make more money, would you do so or not? Somehow, most employers and workers, I find, are fighting with each other over price of labor. He wants $2 increase, or she wants $2 increase, or $3 increase. This is price of labor. What should be the concern of an employer? Cost of labor. Prices and costs are two different things. When you focus too much on price of labor, you tend to have conflictual labor relations. But when you focus on cost, not just of labor, but costs in general in your factory, then your approach is, how do I create an environment whereby costs go down? There, the approach becomes more collaborative, because only through collaborative labor relations you bring down costs. And it's natural, for every worker in any country to expect that with each passing year, my wages will improve. No employer can say that, no, I cannot give you a higher wage rate because then it will increase my cost. Then what's the point in working anywhere? What's the idea of development, basically? So naturally, that's where both employers, governments, and workers need to sit down together. How do we keep improving our lives and work, and our, I would say, our incomes, at the same time also keep our costs under control or reduce cost efficiencies? So that's why I say focusing on prices means fighting. Focusing on cost means finding ways to collaborate. And that's where social dialogue plays a role. Consultations culture can help build trust, create high morale in your workforce, and creates a workforce committed to companies' goals. Those things contribute to productivity and competitiveness of a company. All successful businesses need employee commitment to company goals. You cannot be running a business where employees are not behind you. So consultation culture or social dialogue helps to create that environment. Social dialogue culture also prevents and improves resolution of disputes. So it reduces costs of conflict. Have you ever wondered, most in garment manufacturers, since we're talking about garments, when you create problems with over a worker for a $2 wage rise, basically, and there is a strike or something, you're not just affecting your wage costs, you're affecting your material costs, inventory costs, electricity costs, energy, and all those things. And by not being able to produce optimally, all those other costs also increase. Over what? Just because you were fighting over $2 increase. But your managers will tell the owner of the factory owner, oh, this is, just those are normal costs of doing business, higher electricity, energy costs, inventory costs, all that basically. No, that's where you introduce so many inefficiencies by focusing only on one factor of production. So this social dialogue culture, approach collaborative culture reduces costs of conflicts in many different ways, again, contributes to productivity. Promotes safe workplaces, reduces social and economic costs of accident. I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody in Bangladesh about that. You've had Rana Plaza and many other kind of things, but it's not specific to Bangladesh. Let me tell you something. This kind of approach is there in Southeast Asia. This kind of approach to labor and labor relations is there in other countries of South Asia. It's in Asia in general, and I'll come to it in my last comment, basically, and stop me, wherever you think I should stop. Promotes compliance, reduces the need for government intervention. If labor and employer can sort out their own matters, basically, you can keep the government out. Otherwise, government keeps coming in with more and more laws, and which are, not necessary, which only create more conditions for inefficiencies and a whole lot of other issues that many factory owners know. Every factory owner knows that he can never comply with labor law. So he has a different approach to dealing with the labor inspector, basically, So that's another area where better labor relations help keep government out and saves resources also for the government. Then all this, basically, what does it do? It reflects in your increased rate of return on your investments and improves the capacity of the company to address the needs of the workers as well as address the needs of the shareholders, which is what I call, industrial peace dividend. So, and trade unions need to also understand this, basically. I feel that the trade unions in many countries are very strong on social justice, rights, and that's the way they should be. But they also need to work on towards, realizing that there is a role of workers in the factory and there's a role of management in the factory. And management does have the right to make final decisions. Workers and the trade unions have the right to be consulted, right to consultations, negotiations, collective bargaining, yes, but ultimate decisions, that is a role for, basically. And they need to collaborate, cooperate. That's how Japanese are, essentially, and or even for that matter, Germans, basically. If you see one of the world's two most productive, labor relations, if I can see examples of that, is in Japan, here in Asia, and Germany at the other end, basically. Because it is in the productive enterprises that trade unions have the most negotiating power and influence. If your enterprise is not productive, I'm sorry, trade unions can keep shouting, can go on strikes, but you're not going to get much out. So it is in the interest of both sides to collaborate, and that's what social dialogue tries to do. And I'll stop here, and we can talk more about all this later.
Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, Arun. That was quite an in-depth take on the relevance of social dialogue and why it should be encouraged, and for what reasons. I have a question in the chat for you, Arun. I'll read it out. And I myself have a question to you as well, that I'll ask that later. So the question is, we hear from suppliers at times that the brand insists them to pay more towards living wages, but at the same time, they bring down the volume of orders and calculate every penny during the pricing. Suppliers think that brands are those who are very powerful. Aren't they right?
It's for whom?
It's for you.
No, you're right. Basically, brands, brands also, brands have the CSR department, and brands have a procurement, purchasing department, so to speak. And I don't think two of them talk very much to each other. So it's and in this whole dialogue that we are having of power balance or whatever, in one sense, I feel this is the two people who are at the receiving end of the brand's power talking to each other about imbalancing, basically unbalancing. So yes, I agree. The brands need to back their so-called codes and CSR policies with supportive pricing and purchasing policies, basically. As somebody was mentioning before, value is generated in the countries which are manufacturing garments, but it is appropriated at the other end, basically, brand end. So the dialogue needs to take place. How do we get a better distribution of value along supply chains? Because otherwise there's too much being made about how global supply chains are good for developing countries. No, as long as the value keeps shifting out, it's not very much. It's just some minimum wage employment, basically, which is being created, which doesn't contribute much to the economy. So one way the factory owners, which will be good for the economy, be it India, be it Bangladesh, be it Vietnam, be it Indonesia, to get the better benefit of the supply chain to the country is also through having this culture of collective bargaining. Why do garment workers always have to depend on only minimum wages? This minimum wages are not connected with the contributions that somebody makes to the wealth that is generated by the factory. If more and more, a better share of the value added is diverted towards wages, it benefits employers also, and it benefits government. It also benefits the government. Please remember, if workers have more money in their pocket, what do workers do? They spend. And where do they spend? They spend locally. And every time a worker spends money, or every time wage and salary earners in any country spend money, government makes revenue goes up. So government's tax revenue goes up because of consumption related things. The same impact doesn't happen if more and more value added or wealth that is created by factories stays in the hand of 1 or 2 persons at the top, basically. Because there is a limit to how many refrigerators, houses, clothes, consumption a rich man can have. But workers' consumption is high. And that if there is more demand, more growth, more employment, more revenue for the government, better environment basically for the business eventually, because ultimately things are being bought by the workers, by the business that manufactures them. So having a different approach to wage policy would also positively affect businesses, economy, as well as the government, not just the workers basically. Better wages are not just good for workers, they're good for the government, employers, and the economy. Just follow the supply chain of the wages, how it goes, a circular chain. You'll have the logic.
Great. Thank you for your insight. I have another question to Mr. Martin. And the question is setting minimum price of goods can support suppliers to reduce power imbalance? I think this is very specific to Bangladesh. Will the setting up of minimum price for goods reduce the power imbalance in the chain? Mr. Martin.
Yes, setting a minimum price will obviously help the entrepreneur or the garments for owners to calculate the price, and it will obviously reduce the power imbalance. Okay, nowadays we used to find that for the same design or the same style, the buyers or the brands are offering different price to the different factories, even in the different countries. So if they can fix, and for that, the one thing is very much essential, that is the transparency. From the entrepreneur end and and I can say we are transparent almost up to 80 or 90%, because what are the standard of my factory, it is always available in the website, so the brands can see it. What are the wages I am giving it, that is also surveyed, and that is also are checked by the brands. And what are the price I am giving into the materials or the fabrics, that is known to the brands also. So calculating all those, if they can fix that, yes, this could be the minimum price I am going to offer you, oh, that will obviously reduce the power balance, power imbalance. But till the time we all are becoming transparent with each other, it will be very difficult. I don't think so, that whether they are ready to fix it, the minimum price or not. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question to that. Who will set the price? Will the business association set the price? Is the question.
Yes, business association can set the price, but madam, there are some problems. Problems is that if I can tell you that in case of my factory, I am having almost 9,500 workers. My monthly wages expenditure is almost 13.5 to 14 crore taka. So if I am having the less order in a month, and if I don't take a order with a minimum or with a lower cost, it might happen that some of my lines have to be idle, but I have to pay the wages of the workers. So association can come forward, and they come to a consensus that that should be the minimum price, and beyond that they are not going to receive any order. And with the same things also applicable for the brands also, if they can offer that for this sort of things, this is the base price, and beyond this we are not going down, because if you want the quality and other things, you have to have some base price. But if you find that everything is increasing with that, the base price are not increasing, that is remains in the place where it was 5 years or 3 years back. 3 years back. So association and brand can sit together, and they can fix this lower the bottom price for any product.
Right. Thank you. I have a question to Pranjal, and I request the audience to, if you have a question, either raise your hand or put your question in the chat. We will take up, and our panelists were very good with the time. We have good amount for open question answer. So you can also just let us know, and we'll unmute you to raise your question. But to Pranjal, it's a pity one that we don't have a brand speaking in the panel. It's also because of the timing that we could not have or have asked any brand from European countries to take part, and the brand representatives here would have had the hesitation to share on the power imbalance. But again, as a MSI, ETI has many of the big brands in its membership. And I'm taking the point that Martin raised in his first intervention, that brands should engage with the suppliers and with workers, because workers are also ultimately producing for the brands. So either it is conflict or wage or any dialogue mechanism. To what extent you would agree to what he's saying, or you have a different opinion about it?
Thank you, Suhasini. See, it's not about whether I have a different opinion or whether, agree or disagree. Ultimate objective of any MSI, like ETI, is that we see that there should be equality, there should be inclusivity, there should be, at least the vulnerable sections should not be exploited, whoever, whatever it may be, government sector or other sector. The question or the approach is that we need to have really understand whether some of the approaches are working, whether those can be scalable, whether those are making efficient improvement in the supply chain where we intend to improve in a way. Now let's see the role of a brand. Suppose I'm today probably taking the, kind of filling the gap for the brand in a way, but objectivity is not about defending the brand or, kind of promoting the brand in a way. I think if you ask the brands, they will always tell you that there is a dialogue going on, there is a collaboration going on. But the truth is, there is a dialogue, but those dialogues are very transactional. Because of the stability nature of the business, I don't see, it's like earlier there's only 2 seasons. Now we're talking about 5 seasons. Nobody is asking about, or nobody is evaluating the production cycle capacities, the skill set, requirement of building the skill set. Those investment never been discussed in a dialogue way. And if you see how the dialogue happens is mostly toward, the taking the code of conduct or as a reference point for all those, non-financial or non-commercial kind of, performance or indicator in a way. So some of those things, whether it is related to the wages, related to this thing, working hours, or even integration of technology, integration of productivity improvement, I think there is still a gap. There are a lot of scope for improvement in a way that in a more collaborative way. I think we also need to understand the difference between the compliance or the mandatory things, whether minimum wage is the standard, or can the brand also go beyond compliance in some country? Because Mr. Arun very rightly point out that if tomorrow or today suppliers and workers can talk about their issues, keeping the government out, it can be the ideal situation for anybody to have the bilateral negotiation or tripartite negotiation between this thing. But the question is whether it is mature enough. Are we in a mature enough economies to do that right now, implement that? I think it is a good approach in a way, but I see that the compliance or the state role within the businesses is not reducing in a way. We talk about whether we are governing or we are facilitating as a government in a way. There are a lot of facilitations happening in a way, but that is again not the core of those facilitation is not looking into uplift the workers. It's looking into more about how your economy or GDP is growing, how you create more avenues for route for FDI or foreign direct investment in some of the sectors in a way. I think we need to understand that the brands still has the power, or brands have the power in a way that, and that is the economic power, and which is probably creating the imbalance along the value chain in a way. We talk about, I think initially, Ms. Holly Greta talked about the empathy factor and the trust level, right? So we say that if you be more create a personal relation, or if you take care of your workers, the workers will take care of your business. And it is true in a worker kind of intensive sector like garment. I don't see that relationship are building on and getting incentive for more what you call the better relationship. I can see the reverse is happening in a way that you will see more informalization of the labor force in many countries within the garment sector. I think after the pandemic, that manifestation of informalization is even growing in many countries. Whether brands can tackle this issue, whether brands can really make an effort to create more scope for freedom of association, or creating more dialogue, direct dialogue with the workers, or create space for the unions to be represented well in all those negotiations. I think, see, I don't see collective bargaining is something extraordinary different that can create a differentiator for the company. It is a minimum necessary, essential requirement in terms of labor intensive work in a way. If somebody is saying that because I have, I have a collective bargaining, but that's good. That's not something that can attract more business or something. This is what the minimum requirement in terms of doing responsible business in a way. So I think I'll stop here. Probably if some questions comes up, I'll respond to it.
Sure. I have one question in the chat, but before that, as a moderator, I also have a question. I'll take the liberty of going first. To Ms. Holy Krata, so after you spoke, we also heard from the factory management, Mr. Martin mentioned, and he also said that the history of collective bargaining agreement has not been very encouraging for the industry. And he, of course, spoke from Bangladesh perspective. But we also see, I mean, I would say similar is the case for India. For you, as a unionist, why is the industry so fearful of a collective bargaining agreement or union or workers unionizing, while we see all the brands saying, I mean, upholding that yes, freedom of association is in our code of conduct and workers should be free to unionize, but we don't see it percolating down to the supply chain to the extent that they are actually fearful of having unions on board. I would like to hear your comments.
Okay, thank you, Suhasini, for the question. Maybe because of my nervousness to speak here, I forgot to mention that these last 2 years is the hardest time for all of us, not only for trade union, but also for business association, also for entrepreneur. Mr. Martin, this is very, very hard. I know this is hard for all of us, not only for workers, but also for you. Again, back to your questions, Hasini. In my experience in Indonesia, only companies that have collective bargaining survive. Okay, no termination. They survive. Okay, increase wages every year, despite of this pandemic. Why? Because the collective bargaining moment when we speak in board in the same room with the managers, with the representative of the entrepreneur, there's a moment of truth. There's a moment where the entrepreneurs can also make us to understand what really happened. It's all negotiable. I like to quote what Arun said before. Social dialogue is very, very important. You need to teach union member to listen. Before they go to strike, you need to teach them to listen. So make collective bargaining, it's minimum necessities like what Pranjal said. Yes, I agree. It's minimum necessities. Most of the company afraid because they always think if we have collective bargaining, we cannot do whatever we want to do with where there's something emergency happen. Okay, where something emergency happen, and then we can just cut out the employee. We can just cut down the wages. That make us terrified. But the collective bargaining, it's also a moment when you can share your problem. Union workers can understand. Okay, that's a moment when you see your employee as a human, and we show ourselves as a human who can understand, can learn, can be patient, and can endure every single obstacle with you together. That's the point that always missing between trade union and business association, there's a single missing link. You need to know that our job is our entire life. Okay, working is something precious to us, so we need to make this company running sustainability. Good, we need to keep it sustained. Okay, there's no such thing like we want to make this company to end. No, we want to make this company running because it's our life. How can workers make his or her daily life if they no longer have any jobs to earn their living? Okay, it is important for us. So, but we need to know, to understand, to hear your problem as well. So it's not so very scary. In Indonesia, the company that survive, all the company that survive this pandemic moment is company that got collective bargaining. Even if they cannot afford to raise the wages, they will communicate it internally. Okay, it's not afraid. I think it's not that scary, but yes, it is scary if you cannot lower your employee wages. You cannot lower other expensive because you have collective bargaining to hold on, because that's usually higher than normative standard that been dictated by the government. Speak as for my experience in Indonesia. Indonesia have a wonderful law, labor law, wonderful labor law. I guarantee. We ratified 18 ILO convention, not less than 18. But then what happened in reality? Are there any violated the right of workers that stated in our constitution? Yes, there are so many. Why? Because there's no supervisory function for governor. Okay, they lack of people who will come to company and then monitor all that regulation being performed okay in every company. Nobody will do that. Nobody. The only one that we can hold on is the collective bargaining. So that's
Right.
all been said by Arun several times, and I very much agree with him. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your insight, Holi. There's one more question that I'm going to take up, and then I'll turn again to the panelists for their last remarks. So the question is, apart from the price, the tendency of buyers to switch suppliers in very short timelines, order to order has led suppliers to be very insecure and in effect brought economic insecurity to workers. Request the panelists to comment on the same. Is there a need to change this? If yes, how can this be changed? Anyone can go first. It's not targeted to any one panelist. So whoever wishes to take it. It should ideally be from the business side. Mr. Martin or I can also share my statement.
Yes, ma'am, it's true that it happens. It happens, but it is not happens in every cases. It happens in some of the cases. In case of some of the buyers, yes, it should be be stopped. We send change. If that we can at least we can shoulder it. But if it happens frequently, then it creates a huge business impact or impact on the wages and other places. So there should be some practice so that at least the order which are placed, they should take it. It may not or increase the order, may not or place for the further order, but the order already placed that should be taken, and there should be some assurance from the brands and that yes, these things are assured.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Pranjal, would you want to answer briefly or let it go?
Yeah, I think yes, there are a lot of things already happening within that. It's like it's not only one particular case of short timeline of giving lead time or productivity cycle. Now there are a lot of effort going on how responsible you are in what practices you are having in the purchasing, whether the purchasing department or the social compliance department of the brands are really talking, whether the breach is there or is been built or that gap still exists. All those kind of things are happening, and I think there are a lot of effort going on uh, to improve the purchasing practices in a way. That is one of the clog which has been creating a problem because of the more volatile nature of the business, more kind of demand for fast fashion in a way, which is creating that you do not know how the consumer will react and how fast, how much lead time you have in that bringing. I think a lot of things are happening in making even fashion more sustainable. It's called apparel more sustainable in a way that whether you need to incorporate all those practices right from the design to the final delivery logistic in a way, right? Technology has helped. I mean, it is natural that your time of production will come down because earlier it used, logistic used to take a lot of time, a lot of to and fro information. But now, because of the integration of technology, those communication time has reduced significantly in last 5-10 years in a way. So it is natural that the production lead time will reduce, but that some of the things are still where the labor intensive work time is still kind of constant. You have better machines where this thing, but there are a lot of processes remain the same way, whether it is printing, whether it is fabric production, all those associated auxiliary work related to a production of the garment. So I think it is relevant that this is one of the pain point with the suppliers because of the smaller order or more frequent change in the style and all those kind of things. But there are concerted effort happening in a lot of associated work in the garment manufacturing so that those challenges can be mitigated or reduced significantly.
Thank you, Pranjal. And that was the questions that we got. And I would again come back to all of you as a panelist. Any last remarks that you may have based on what the questions were there or some thoughts that came after your first intervention? Yeah, please unmute yourself and you can state your thoughts, and then I'll conclude the session soon after.
Okay, let me go since quickly. One thing I feel that the factory owners and the workers' organizations in the garment manufacturing countries should do is certainly talk a little bit more among each other to have a common agenda with the brands, basically, because I feel that the brands pay a lot of lip service, basically, and occasionally a lot of money to the NGOs in support of their CSRs and codes and conduct. But they do very little on the ground to change their behavior in terms of purchasing and other things, which is what influences a lot of conditions. So So that's something that I feel, and that's why I feel that the government manufacturers in these countries and the trade unions in these countries, instead of having an allergy to each other, they should be having a culture of sitting down over dialogue, over helping each other understand. Certainly, the business needs to make trade unions also understand the challenges that the business faces. Which so that's one thing I think in each country needs to be done a lot more than has been happening. I think they only meet when organizations like Fairware Foundation or ILO organizes a meeting, then the employers will come and normally they don't have a culture of meeting each other, basically. Second point is this whole idea of approach to trade unions and collective bargaining. In most of the Asian countries, I find the approach to freedom of association is more from the lens of law and order security, rather than they see it as a decent work or a labor market issue. Because they see freedom of association, right to organize, and all these unions as something that's troublesome, that's something that creates problems, security and police. Police has a more role in regulating freedom of association, basically, in most of these countries. That thought needs to change, because it needs the idea of trade unions and idea of collective bargaining needs to be seen as a labor market issue and a decent work issue. Secondly, just to question of union, basically, what should be the concern of an employer? You want to have an influence over your workforce, or you want to bust a trade union? What is your objective as a manager? You want to have more influence over your workforce, right? So that you can. So if you are thinking like I am against the union, I don't, which is the right, which your law says, constitution says, you automatically take on a position that is anti-constitution, violation or everything. While your legitimate concern is having influence over your workforce. So when you think like that, you have different policies to think about. When you think that I don't want a union, you think differently. And you then violate laws in that process. So how about being compliant with the law, at the same time also having policies whereby an employer management can have influence over your workforce? Now, there are different ways to do that. Having workplace consultation, cooperation mechanisms, having more information sharing, having training, building work ethics. All these things are the ones that make an employer, basically workforce more basically behind the company goals. Not your anti-union approach, basically. Unfortunately, because we think freedom of association, unions are trouble, and that that government also thinks like that. That's why or this government plays. I mean, our labor relations in most of our countries are too state-centric. Government plays all the role. It's like reminds me of those two cats that were fighting over, that little piece of roti or whatever we want to call it, and that monkey in between took the most of it. And that's what the labor relations in South Asia and in particular are. The two parties that have a problem with each other don't talk to each other and expect the government to solve their problems. No, they're not better placed. No government in South Asia is better placed to solve your problems. So you need to start. Bipartite labor relations are the weakest link. So there a lot of rethinking needs to be done on that. Final point, how do you see collective bargaining? You see collective bargaining, first of all, the moment the word is used, both unions and employers think, wages. You negotiate wages once a year or once in 2 years or once in 3 years, depending on when the collective bargaining agreements take place, basically. But the collective bargaining is a form of social dialogue in which you can discuss not just workers' concerns, you discuss companies' concerns, you resolve disputes. It's a form of industrial relation institution. The question to ask yourself is, are you seeing collective bargaining as a contractual issue, like I have to make a contract basically with the union, or do you see it as an opportunity for relationship building? You can. Right. Japanese trade unions, that's what they have done. They see collective bargaining, both employers and basically unions, they have used collective bargaining to build relationships. The law doesn't play so much role in Japan in promoting workplace cooperation. It's a mutual agreement. The philosophy of theirs is we cooperate with each other to increase the size of the pie, and we bargain to share in the pie. And both sides respect that. But we don't
Thank
have
you.
this.
Arun, I'll stop you there. I'm sorry.
Right.
Any other panelists for the last remarks?
I have a quick 2 points to make.
Yes, please.
One is that I completely agree with the points Arun just made, that how you consider collective bargaining, how you consider freedom of association. I think what we are looking at in terms of the space we occupy part of the MSI is that to facilitate more dialogue, facilitate more collaboration between different different stakeholders in a way, in making the garment businesses sustainable in a way. And the other point is that probably there's a need for building capacity not in terms of the skill set, but building capacity in terms of to understand the need of social dialogue, right from the brands to the workers, including the trade union in a way. And we need to make the business case very clear that how the social dialogue has created more enabling environment for the businesses to progress, reducing conflict, and also to understand that how social dialogue can provide very valuable insight for the policymaker to create a better policy environment for the workers, the business, or the all stakeholder group in that sense. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pranjal.
I'm having 2 points.
Yes, please.
That is what I believe, that the social dialogue is the only place where these sort of ambiguities can be solved or can create a better working environment in the factory. But for this, one capacity building is required. In this factor, my humble request will be towards the different federations and the NGOs was to make the worker leaders or the workers giving in their some knowledge on not only on their rights, but their side by side the responsibilities they need to share. That's things. And another
Okay.
point is that as the wages are increasing every year, so the brand should have some provision, so that at the end of the year or the beginning of a year, they should have some provision to have a calculation and increase the rate according to the increase of the wage. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Martin. I have to make an abrupt stop there. I'm sorry, and sorry to Ms. Hooli as well, because I cannot come to you for your last remarks. We are like 1 minute up. Thank you. I would say that there's a need to have yet another session on sourcing dialogue, where brands engage with factories to and the kind of dialogue that should go in there. But that would require yet another very focused discussion. I would like to sincerely thank all the panelists for sharing your point of view, and to all the participants for being very active and putting very good questions. Thank you, and I will pass on the mic to my friend from Tandemic.
Thank you so much, Suhasini, and thank you to all of our panelists for such a fantastic and thought-provoking discussion. As you know, we have a whole variety of interesting side sessions as part of the 3rd UN South Asia Forum on Business and Human Rights. And you've got here part of the program. So coming up next, solutions to address conditions in the leather-based garment industry, indigenous voices, corporate capture, lots of interesting topics coming up. Do visit the website if you'd like to have more information on the remaining sessions, the remaining side sessions at SAF-BHR.com if you haven't already. But in the meantime, we're all wishing you a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aaron.
Bye-bye.